So writing for your audience is a very important skill to learn in any form of writing. It's not any less true in academic writing. Effective writing requires some understanding of your reader. And before we get into this, I want to spend a few moments discussing high context versus low context language. This is a concept that comes out of social anthropology or cultural anthropology. And basically what it means is that some cultures are high context. High context means that the responsibility for effective communication lies on the receiver. So if I, am reading your paper, it would be my job to kind of figure out what you're trying to say. Low context cultures work in the opposite way. It's the responsibility of the writer or the person speaking and communicating to make themselves understood. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, discussed this concept a little bit, and it's very interesting. I put some links to it below. But the point that I want to make here is that effective academic writing, particularly when done in English, and English is a low context language, it's distinctly low context. What that means is the onus is completely on you as the writer to make yourself understood. Remember, your professors or your TAs are not going to feel offended if you spell out your point, if you spell out your logic. That's actually what we're looking for, because I, as the reader, don't want to have to go looking for that. I don't want to put in that kind of extra effort. Another element that makes academic writing particularly low context is the part where it's a conversation that involves so many different people from so many different places and different countries. So you can't really expect a reader, if somebody read your paper who's from a different culture from you, to understand different references or cultural references unless you spell them out. So the exercise in academic writing is really kind of spelling out your logic, making it clear for somebody who comes from a kind of a different place than you. Okay. Now let's get into the meat of this lecture. When you're writing an academic paper at the undergraduate level, you're writing it either for a professor or for a TA. To be honest, this is the same at the graduate level and beyond, because your audience is going to be either PhDs or graduate students. Now, in order to pitch your message effectively, it's good to know who these people are. So let's start with your professor. Who is your professor? Your professor is somebody probably between the age of 30 and 60. The average years of schooling are over 21, usually closer to 27 or 28, if not more. Their average salary here is between 60 and 100,000 per year, so they're generally on average not rich but not poor. These are all very approximate statistics, as you might be able to tell. The real important question on this slide is the following. What is the average number of pages to read every single day for your average professor? Is it A, way too many, B, hundreds, C, more than he or she is ever going to get to, or D, all of the above? If you guessed all of the above, you are correct. Now, let's move on to your TA. Who is your TA? TAs are, almost without exception, overworked graduate students. The average age is late 20s. The average years of schooling, over 21 in this case, maybe usually about, I would say 25 or 26. And the average rate of depression, and this is true, you can actually look this up, is about 50%, so quite high. Again, what is the average number of pages this person has to read every day? You should guess D, all of the above, immediately. The point that I want to drive home here is that this audience doesn't have time to dig through your paper to find, the hidden gems there. Really, if you want to stack the deck in your favor, you make yourself easy to understand. Now, I would also like to tackle this question about whether writing for the TA really is worse than writing for the professor. The short answer is yes. And the reason for that is that, as you can see from the previous slide, this person has, a lot of work to do, not very much control over it. There are actually relatively high rates of depression amongst graduate students in general. What does that mean for you? That just means take everything that I've said and however much importance you've assigned to it in your mind, kick it up a notch, and it's that much more important. Okay? Respect convention, respect the assignment. A TA doesn't have the same kind of authority as a professor in terms of taking creative license in understanding your paper. A TA has to stick to the rule book a little bit more. So that means make sure your assignment follows the instructions in the assignment. Make sure your paper follows the conventions that have been spelled out for you. And make sure that your tone is always kind of respectful. Because, your TA is more likely to get offended about that than your professor. Doing all of these things stacks the deck in your favor. Sometimes the ideas that you're going to have in your paper, the facts and the arguments, may be kind of so-so. But if you're able to present them well, to package them well, to follow the assignment, to follow the conventions, then your audience is predisposed to agree with you, to like what you've had to say, because you've just kind of proved you're taking academia and the academic world seriously. Also, don't forget that your audience is steeped 24/7 in the conventions of their fields. What that means is that when you present a paper to them, you're doing yourself a favor if your paper respects that world, respects that fishbowl, okay? And shows that, yeah, I get it and I'm willing to play the game. So, to recap, make sure your paper respects the convention that your audience is steeped in. Also, make your paper easy to read. How do you do this? You do this by respecting the assignment, by using conventional structure and formatting, because that way I know what to expect when I read your paper, and by prioritizing clarity.